Welcome to Surrender School, Emotional Sobriety Workshop. Chapter 15, Paddling Our Own Canoe.
All right. So this is our last session together. I cannot believe it has been 4 months. That just blows me away. I want to thank all of you for being involved. And I have to tell you, it was so much fun and such an honor to explore all this stuff with you guys. It really enriched my understanding of the material. So thank you very much. I really had a blast. So I'm just going to dive into the last chapter. This is kind of his finishing, sum it up kind of chapter. So on page 293, Dr. Berger uses the analogy of learning how to paddle a canoe for emotional sobriety. I thought that was a great analogy. He says we improve our skill through practice and trial and error. And I think it's important that we're not afraid to fail. I mean, we're going to try new things, and not everything we try is going to work. We have to be okay with that. And okay, that didn't work. You dump it, you try something else. That's what trial and error and learning is all about. He says we have to cooperate with the forces of nature, with reality. And he says fear of capsizing the canoe turns us into control freaks. That's brilliant. Page 294. He says that too often we try to change life to meet our conditions instead of changing ourselves to meet the conditions and requirements of life. It's like we have it backwards. And we console ourselves with food because it doesn't work. We didn't realize that the problem was that we had never learned how to deal with the ever-changing conditions and requirements of life. Dr. Berger goes on to say that we built a highly unstable canoe using the blueprint drafted by our false self. And I love this. He says, when our vessel was leaky and unsteady, we blamed the water for that instead of our canoe. We blame life for things instead of the way that we're dealing with and coping with life. We point outwards instead of pointing back. Page 295, Dr. Berger explains that emotional stability is achieved by becoming aware of our toxic beliefs and unenforceable rules. And to me, that's like a fantastic basic summary of emotional sobriety. Emotional stability is achieved by becoming aware of our toxic beliefs and unenforceable rules. These are the ideas that make our emotional balance dependent on external conditions. Okay. Once we become, on page 296, once we become aware of our unenforceable rules, we must surrender them and know that we are okay no matter what does happen or what doesn't happen. We are okay. We are okay no matter whether the water is warm or cold or white water or still. We're going to get our canoe through there. We're going to be fine no matter what happens. We also need to surrender our expectations, and we need to learn how to cope with life on life's terms. We learn that the river is in charge, and we learn how to respond to its rules and stay afloat instead of demanding that the river do what we want the river to do. When you put it like that, when you use that analogy, you see how ridiculous that is. We can't make the river do anything. We can't make the river be different than the river is, right? So it's easier to see when you apply that analogy to, we can't make life be what it isn't, or we can't make or force life or anyone else to be what we want them to be, and how ridiculous that is and how crazy that makes us. And it gives us a perfect excuse to eat. Page 297. He tells us that as our competence grows, so does our self-esteem. We develop a greater faith in our ability to cope with life. And I've talked about, the little notion of micro wins, and how as we start gaining little micro wins, oh, I navigated that pretty decently, oh, I kept my mouth shut there, oh, I saw how, I was thinking about that and had an unenforceable rule, these little micro wins, and they make us feel better about ourselves. They make us feel like, oh, maybe I can cope with life. Maybe I can be okay no matter what someone does or doesn't do. He reiterates that all of this takes practice and more practice. Emotional sobriety is a practice, not a one-time achievement. That's why we have to be okay with failing, because sometimes sometimes we're not going to be the most emotionally sober people. But we can step back, we can learn from it, and then we can try again, over and over and over again. Page 298, Dr. Berger says that we need to realize that the trouble we encounter in our relationship doesn't mean something is wrong with our recovery program or our relationship. It just means we have more growing to do. It just means we have more work to do. It's not the end of the freaking world. There's that line in the OA 12 and 12 that I just love, how, when other people get a flat tire, they call AAA. When we get a flat tire, we call suicide prevention. It's that it just means we have more work to do. We just have more growing to do. It's okay. Page 299, he says that emotional sobriety is continuous learning and integration that leads to more and more emotional maturity. It's an ongoing process that never, ever ends. That's all I got.
We love you all. See you at the next study.